Welcome, I'm the Deadwood Jedi. This is another Raid Shadow Legends video, and I had a request in the comments of my last video like this, asking if I could go over the buff extension champions. Champions like Godseeker and Aniri, and so I said, well, yeah, let's do it. That's next. Let's make it happen. So that's what today's video is. We're going to go over all the different champions that extend buffs for your team, and we're going to be looking at it specifically from the viewpoint of, is this good for clan boss? And that does make a big difference, right? There are champions that can do amazing things for you, but that doesn't quite work for clan boss. So there's always a different little viewpoint when you're looking at these champions and how they work. So we're going to go through that today. It's not a ton of champions, but as always, I do like to give you the full, in-depth look at them, and so I'm gonna go ahead and try and be as extensive as I can with this. Now, of course, these are my opinions, right? My opinions are not everybody's opinions, and champions can be used in a lot of different ways. So if you disagree with me, or if you think I missed somebody, was just extremely missed them, go ahead and let me know down in the comments below. I would like to hear from you. I learn something almost every time I do a video. Someone puts a comment down there where I'm like, oh, I didn't know that. That's good to know. So if one of these champions is doing more work for you than I'm even realizing, please let me know. I'd love to hear that. So with that, let's go ahead and check out the champions. Before I get to that, if you guys like this video, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, hit the like button. Let's look at the champions. So as always, we're going to try and start from the least effective and go all the way up to the most effective champion, kind of a reverse tier list, if you will. And we're going to start with the champion that I really don't expect to be very good for you, and that's Quargan the Crowned. And, I talked about him a little bit before when we were talking about block debuff champions, got a lot of conditions on his skills. His A1 does have a chance of increasing the duration of random buffs, but it's a 30% chance, 50% when booked. It's only a single hit attack, and it's one random buff on one ally for one turn. It's not really going to make a huge difference to your team. In fact, most likely this is actually going to screw you up by extending the duration of buffs that can throw off things like the stun. So one of the things I really don't recommend is using Quargan the Crowned on any speed-tuned traditional teams, because it can throw off things like the stun targeting, which can make a big difference to your run. Now, if you don't care who the stun takes, it's a nice little passive ability that he's got on his A1 skill. Nothing too crazy about it, but he's definitely last on my list. All right, the next two champions I have are really good champions. They're just not great for clan boss. And one of them is this, Wither the Crown. Now, this actually, she's not bad for clan boss at all. Definitely somebody I would recommend bringing in. And the only reason why I bring her up is she will extend one specific buff, continuous heals. So she's got like this leech on the A1, which is great. She's got a continuous heal buff for a random ally. These are great skills. Nothing wrong with that. Increased defense on the A2 for everybody, and then increases the duration of all continuous heals, and then instantly activates them. Really good. I mean, Wither the Crowned is one of the best healers in this game, maybe the best healers. She's got a full cleanse and a massive heal here. They're all on 3-turn cooldowns. Even has a nice passive ability, placing continuous heal on somebody with the lowest HP. Really, really good. You can definitely bring her into your clan boss teams, but as far as extending buffs, it doesn't really fit the bill, right? But I figured it was worth mentioning as someone definitely keep an eye out for. Now, is this the type of champion I would generally bring into my clan boss team? No, and the reason why is because she's so much better in other areas of the game. Now, obviously, if you're early, mid-game, and this is one of your few legendary champions, she's going to be fabulous for you. Lots of healing, no turn meter stuff, so you don't have to worry about that. Increased defense is going to help keep your team alive. Really, really going to be excellent for clan boss. Just wouldn't be my first choice generally, because she's going to be really good in other areas of the game, especially things like arena. And so that's how I'd want to build her, is for that, not clan boss. But that said, she is really good. Now, the next one's a controversial choice because she is an absolutely outstanding champion, and a lot of people do use her for clan boss and very effectively. But when you're talking about, for most people, you're going to want a speed tuned team, and this champion is really going to throw that off and make it very hard for you to do that. And the reason why, Atlanticus, the Chosen, she has a lot of stuff in her kit that throws off speed tuning. Let's get into it. So the first one, she's got A1, got continuous heal, which is great. She's got a ally attack, and this is what makes her so strong, especially for clan boss. It's such a great thing to get extra attacks for your team. However, this also comes with a 30% turn meter fill. This is also the skill that will extend the duration of ally buffs. So she's really, really good. But that turn meter fill is very hard to tune around, especially because it is a 4-turn cooldown when booked. So it does not happen regularly, certainly not regularly enough to properly speed tune a team around it, which makes it very, very difficult. I don't think I have any speed tunes on the website that involve Atlanticus. The only ones that we really know about are like those infinity comps where you're giving her reflex gear, and we're just trying to extend buffs as often as possible, and we're not really speed tuned as much as we're just running as fast as we can. This is not really a champion I generally will recommend, but she is on the list not only because her buff extension is great, but she is really good if you use her for your team. She just won't be good for speed tuning your team. The ceiling of this kind of a champion is pretty high, but the floor is really low too, so you got to be careful with that. She also has an extra turn that is granted 50% of the time when booked on a 4-turn cooldown with her A3 skill. Again, those sometimes and sometimes not abilities are real problematic when it comes to things like Clan Boss, because you need regularity to properly tune a team. She doesn't bring that, but she's amazing in Arena. She's amazing in pretty much every area of the game. She is very good in Clan Boss, just not somebody I would recommend building around. She's going to be more useful in other areas of the game for you, and Clan Boss is probably going to screw things up more than it's going to help. With that, we get into the more traditional champions here, and I'm talking, of course, about Valkyrie. Valkyrie is a rare champion, Bannerlords, very good for Clan Boss. She has a solid base defense for a rare champion. HP is on a little bit on the lower side, but for a rare champion, it's not so bad. She doesn't really bring anything to the kit except for that buff extension. A1 is just an attack. The A3 is a shield for all allies. It's a very small shield too, and a heal, but again, it's a very small heal. So I don't even use that skill when I bring her in a Clan Boss. The one thing she does do is this A2 ability, which is very good actually. Books to a 3-turn cooldown, which means you can make it very regular for your team. Increases the duration of all buffs on all allies. Also decreases the duration of debuffs on allies by 1 turn. So you get stunned, you can cleanse it. You get that like those affinity debuffs, it can at least lower it by 1 turn. It's not going to cleanse it for you though. Something to keep in mind. And gives you an increased attack buff, which isn't bad, right? Increased attack, no matter how big or small, is always going to be helpful. She's a very solid champion. If you don't have any other buff extenders, she can be very useful for you. You will want to make sure that you prioritize her skills in the AI. She will use her shield before she uses anything else, which will just mess everything up. It's very annoying how that happens. You definitely need to prioritize this A2 skill if you want it to happen regularly. She's a solid champ, nobody crazy. She's somebody I did book up to 60. I think that's a reasonable thing to do, but she's never going to be my first choice of a champion to bring into most any content. Then we talk about Hellborn Sprite, who is a rare champion that is in some of the highest damage dealing teams in this game. I think she is actually a part of the top damage dealing teams that Victor Tess has done. So she is pretty fantastic in that sense. But the reason why she's, so good in those teams isn't really that she's so great. It's more due to the things that she brings to your team, which is always a good thing and important when you're building your Clan Boss team. I definitely think this is somebody you should keep an eye out on. She's got a weaken on her A1. Having a weaken ability, no matter how big, this is a small version, it's still incredibly useful. It ups your damage, and this is why she's crazy in those teams. On top of that, she has this triple attack with a heal reduction. We don't really care about heal reduction here. Triple attack is nice though. That always says maybe we can use Giant Slayer, but with an A1 just single attack, we're probably not going to do that. And then the A3 is a increase the duration of all ally buffs by 1 turn and places a crit rate buff on all allies by 2 turns. It's a small 15%, but still helpful. This is booked to a 3-turn cooldown. All of these get booked to a 3-turn cooldown, which means that, yeah, Giant Slayer would be fine, but honestly, War Master is just as good with this champion. There's not going to be a difference as far as damage goes there, but we have to love this ally increased duration buff. Having it on a 3-turn cooldown is great. This is what makes her better than Valkyrie, though. She also brings some useful debuffs in the weekend. Now, she also brings a heal reduction, so you got to kind of balance. Am I better off getting that small weaken versus losing a spot for another debuff? But if you don't have a weaken on your team, that's definitely going to be the more valuable choice, and she can be really good. Now, she has bad base stats for Clan Boss, right? Low speed, low defense, HP is okay. She's an attack-based champion, which is always harder to gear up for your teams. She works for those infinity comps because you're relying on these massive shields, and you're not actually relying on Hellborn Sprite to deal the damage for you. You're letting your other champions do that. She's definitely not my first choice. And in some cases, I might even prefer Valkyrie because it's going to be easier to make her survive longer to build her defense up because she has like an extra 200 base. But I do think she brings more utility to your team and definitely someone else to keep an eye out on. Now we start getting into the epic champions, and with this category of skills, we're definitely going to see a difference between the rares and the epics moving into the legendaries. And we're going to start with Fleshterror here, who's really unique champion, really unique. And that we don't use him enough. And part of the reason why his skills are on 4-turn cooldowns, which makes them a little harder to tune normally. But there is a lot of utility in this champion. First off, A1, have 40% chance of transferring random debuffs from this champion to target. We don't care about that really with Clan Boss. The one big problem with Fleshterror is he's not a very good hitting champion, right? His multiplier is actually just really, really low. So he's not going to be a good damage dealer for you. And that really does matter when it comes to Clan Boss, especially some of the more extravagant tunes. We need our champions to hit hard. He doesn't. So that's a big problem. One thing he does bring though is a massive heal. 30% heal, max HP for every champion, that's really good. And this is the one that increases the duration of all ally buffs. It's great. It is a 4-turn cooldown, again, so that definitely limits the abilities here. But, I mean, a 30% heal is really great. We actually get another 20% on top of that once we book him fully. So I guess that would be more of like a 20%, like a 36% heal, which is pretty darn good, I would say. Definitely significant for Clan Boss, so that's really nice. And then his A3, it is an attack, again, not a very strong attack, so he's not going to be a good damage dealer for you, but decreases the duration of all enemy buffs by 1 turn and increases the duration of all enemy debuffs by 1 turn. So this champion's really unique in that he gives you not only a buff extension for your team, but he will basically strip the buffs for the enemy and extend the duration of your debuffs on the enemy. This can make it really nice when you have champions that are, landing your debuffs consistently, or they have really long cooldowns, for example. He's really good because he can extend the duration of those debuffs, and that can help you fill up a debuff bar. I mean, if you know anything about, Clan Boss with champions like Bulwark, Vizier, Warlord, or is there anybody else that does Septimus, right? These are 4 champions that typically we bring into Clan Boss to extend the duration of debuffs. Well, Fleshterror is another one of those. And when we can fill up a debuff bar, that's just going to maximize our damage, whether that's keeping a decreased defense or decreased attack debuff on, or just making sure we have full poisons all the time. That can be really, really helpful. So this is a good champion, but again, this book's to a 4-turn cooldown. This is a 4-turn cooldown, and his A1 is weak as all get out. So he's just not a really good damage dealer, and the cooldowns are just a little too long to be able to use him super consistently. This is why we don't see him in a lot of teams, but he is a very good champion. I've seen some interesting comps using him way back in the day, where you'd use like 2 of these Fleshterrors to make sure you keep debuffs up for an entire fight. It's kind of a cool idea in combat and team to kind of build around, but it obviously is a little bit tricky to do. Solid base defense, solid base HP, attacks a little bit on the lower side, but he also has an abysmal speed. 89 speed is extremely low, so he's also hard to gear out. This is why we don't use him very much. Okay, we went through all the trash. We went through all the guys that we need to know about, but we're not going to use. Now we get to the champions that we're actually going to use fairly consistently, people that are good for Clan Boss. This is easily the worst of that group, but she's still quite good. We don't use her a ton because of her cooldown, but I have used her successfully. She is really nice, and I'm talking about Hope here. And Hope brings a lot of stuff to the table. First off, she's got good multipliers, so she can deal damage. Not God tier or anything like that, but she's not going to be a waste on your team. She's going to keep the damage numbers up for your squad. First off, she's got a block buffs debuff on the A1. This is probably the worst part, right? We don't need that. So when I build her for Clan Boss, I don't build her with accuracy. I don't think you need it. It's really, placing this is actually probably going to be more detrimental than it's going to be beneficial. The only time I would want to build this is if I had a Valkyrie in my team and I didn't want that affinity passive to be working. Her A2 is the one we love. Increases duration of buffs on all allies by 1 turn and places a shield equal to 25% of this champion's HP on all allies for 2 turns. So a couple things. Obviously, one, it says champion's HP, not max HP. Good to know, right? If she's low on health, that shield's going to be a lot smaller too. But you can build her however you want. So you can build her with high HP if you really want that shield to be functioning. And she's got a really good base HP, especially for an epic champion. So that is, I think, an excellent way to build this champion, right? Really high HP, get a massive shield. And you guys know how important getting a shield is. As far as staying alive, it can make all the difference in the world. And on top of that, she's increasing the duration of buffs. So this 2-turn is probably going to be, I think it becomes a 3-turn because of the extension. It's a really big shield. Again, we're getting another 20% of that 25%. So it's basically turning into about a 30% shield, which is very, very sizable. And that can be really nice. If you can build her with 50,000 HP, for example, all of a sudden you have a 15,000 HP shield for your champions. That's pretty good. Definitely a sizable amount there. Now, her A3 can be good, right? This is another hard-hitting skill, 50% chance of removing all buffs. So books up to 75. This kit actually works really well for things like Arena, where you can get a nice little strip. It's not 100% though, so limits on that, but she can be really good. This again hits decently hard, so all of her skills can hit pretty good. You get a really nice shield and you get a nice buff extension. Positive, she's got great speed base, like really good base speed, really good base HP. Her base defense is very low though, so that is definitely going to be an issue. Her skills are based on attack, which again limits how you're going to build her and how you're going to get that damage out of her. This is one of the reasons why she's last on this list. The one negative thing, big negative thing, is these are all 4-turn cooldowns, so you're not getting these skills coming up super regularly, and that's probably the biggest issue with her. But otherwise, I actually really like Hope. I wish I could use her more. It's just her skills, the cooldowns, that base defense are problematic. And then we talk about everybody's favorite orc, Sandlash Survivor. She's very good in a lot of areas of this game, including Arena, but especially for Clan Boss. Her A1 hits hard. Her skills hit hard. This is one of the reasons why we like Sandlash Survivor. She is a very decent hitting champion. Now, the A1's kind of average. It's not crazy, but it's average. The 2-hit attack, right, with a provoke, which we don't really care about. She will heal a little bit off of this hit as well, which is kind of nice, right? 15% of the damage inflicted if they're under any debuffs. So if she's under debuffs, she'll heal up. We don't really factor that in when it comes to Clan Boss. The best thing is A2. It's an AoE attack, so we're not losing a turn like we would with Hope, where she's placing a shield and extending buffs. This is actually an attack, so we get damage off of all of her skills. Decreases the duration of all enemy buffs by 1 turn, and increases the duration of all ally buffs by 1 turn. Really nice combination there for Clan Boss, where you're lowering that increased attack the Clan Boss gets, and you're increasing the duration of the buffs your allies take. This is a nice, strong skill. It's not crazy, but it is a very solid skill. One of the great things about her, though, is this passive ability where she'll place an ally protection on all allies for 2 turns when any ally's HP drops below 50%. Also places a block damage buff on this champion for 1 turn. This can kind of save you at points in the fight. Now, this books to a 4-turn cooldown. The buff extension books to a 3-turn cooldown. So it's really hard to rely upon this passive. Also, it's going to activate the first time anybody drops below 50%. So if you get a bad crit at the wrong point in the fight, even if you tuned around this, it's very hard to get this, linked up the way you'd want to, so you can guarantee that this passive ability procs at the right time. But it can be really good. One of the other things is this only activates once a champion's HP drops below 50%. So, ally protection, you take half the damage, your ally takes half the damage. Well, we're only starting that after they've already lost half their damage. So this is it's basically kind of like a 25% ally protection for Clan Boss anyway. So it's not even really that good because of the Gathering Fury. But the idea is that this can be a really good emergency situation when somebody like, your Skull Crusher, for example, puts up counterattack, ally protection. He drops his HP down really low. Ally protection procs right there on Sandlash. And now in that second AoE, while everybody has ally protection from Skull Crusher, even Skull Crusher has ally protection from Sandlash Survivor. So there are ways where this can be really, really helpful. But again, the cooldowns limit that ability. You can just try to book this and keep it at a 4-turn cooldown. That's a thing you can do, and then put her on a 4-3 ratio so it becomes a little bit more consistent. Again, like I said, the timing with the pass is very difficult to do, but that is certainly a possibility and something you can consider doing. There's a famous video of me talking with or helping Saffron Man with his Clan Boss team a while back, and that's kind of what I was trying to do, and things didn't go according to plan. But that is certainly a possibility of things you can try to do with the Sandlash Survivor. She's very good. She also has a really good defensive aura, 25% in all battles. Great base defense. Base HP is a little bit on the low side, but that's okay. Base speed is pretty low, so you got to factor that in. She is a defensive champion, though, so much easier to build for Clan Boss. And now we get into the creme de la creme of buff extenders. These are the best champions. And actually, we're down to 3. And these are easily the 3 best, the ones you're going to want to bring into your team. Sandlash kind of breaks into that top A4 group, right? Because her skills are on 3-turn cooldown. She can do decent damage for you. She's defensive based, easy to build. But these three really are a cut above. If you have a choice between any of the previous ones and these three, these are the three you're going to want to use. And obviously, we're going to start with the Mitha here. Now, you might be surprised that she's not higher up on this list, but there's some reasons for that. First off, she's not a damage dealer. She's not going to do good damage for you. Simple as that. She just doesn't have enough damage dealing skills. Her A1 here is a 2-hit attack. It does place a shield for 2 turns, equal to 10% of this champion's max HP on the ally with lowest HP. This can actually be pretty useful in some things like Hydra, or if you have a champion like Brogni in your team, this could actually be, you know, nice, because all you need is shield. Doesn't necessarily mean how much to get the extra damage from someone like Brogni. Just something to kind of keep in mind. Her A2, this is the one that increases the duration of all ally buffs by 1 turn and decreases the duration of all ally debuffs by 1 turn. So you can use her to remove the stun or decrease the duration of those affinity debuffs. I have not been able to successfully use her with that kind of skill in mind, and I don't think you're going to be able to either, because we're going to generally focus on the next skill in this list, not the extension itself. That said, this is an exceptionally good skill. It heals allies by 2.5% of their max HP and heals by a further 2.5% for each turn added to or removed from the duration of buffs and debuffs by this skill. That means the more buffs you have on your allies that are getting extended, the bigger that heal is. This can be a very significant heal. I mean, very significant. So this is definitely something you're going to want to keep in mind. She's an amazing, amazing healing champion. Let's see, her A3 here, this is the one we usually use her for. Block damage on all allies for 1 turn. Continuous heal buff on all allies for 2 turns. This is, of course, amazing. Now, just caveat, you cannot extend block damage. You cannot extend unkillable buffs. Those are the 2 buffs you can't extend no matter what you want to do. So just keep that in mind as well. But block damage for all allies on 1 turn. This is how we get all those myth air. Any of these myth comps, they're all based on Demitha, the myth from Demitha. You get it. And it's just an amazing ability. But she gives you continuous heal. She gives you AoE heal. And the thing is, though, this A3 and the A2, neither of those are attacks. So you're not going to get damage out of her. She's going to keep your team alive. So this is why I have her a little bit lower on the list. Now, obviously, with myth teams, she's the linchpin. She makes it work. So you're not going to get better than that for those teams, but there is a limit to how useful these are because of that. So you're not going to bring her necessarily into every team, but I don't care what team you're running. Getting block damage for 1 turn, it doesn't matter where it happens, whether it's a stun, an AoE, whatever. That's super useful. Being able to block all the damage for even 1 turn is amazingly helpful. The fact that all of these can book down to a 3-turn cooldown is fantastic as well. That's a really strong thing, right? Because it makes it real easy to tune around. Because this is a 1-turn block damage, you generally want her going last in the turn order. That way she can place it and it will stay on everybody for the enemy attack, which also limits things a little bit more, but you know, she's not a damage dealer, so she doesn't get counterattack. Who cares? When it really comes down to it, doesn't very much matter. You don't need to build her up with very high attack. She's got very low base anyway, but you don't need to build her up because she's not going to do a ton of damage. Now, the multipliers on this champion are good. So if you do build damage on her, you'll get something out of it, right? She'll hit hard with this A1 skill. I mean, it's a really, really strong multiplier that she has, but she's got very low base attack. She's only got the 1 attack. So even if you do that, the reward for the amount of resources you're putting into that are going to be a lot lower. So I generally don't recommend that until you're, you know, really hitting that end game, or you're just trying to fully optimize your team. I just don't think it's necessarily worth it. I'd rather build up on a very strong defense and very strong HP, very strong speed, and make sure that she is staying alive, because if she dies, your team dies. So keeping her alive longer is definitely useful. But in general, just a phenomenal champion for you. Okay, this champion has to be one of my favorites any area of this game. She's amazing. She's been fantastic in Hydra. She's fantastic in Clan Boss. She's great in Arena. And of course, I'm talking about Godseeker Aniri. Not only, I mean, first off, she might be the best looking champion in this game. Not saying she's, you know, the hottest chick around, but I mean, the artwork, the burn on the hand, the armor that she's wearing, the wings, the glowing sword, just absolutely phenomenal. I mean, honestly, yeah, I'd follow her in the battle. But what she has for a kit, A1, heal the attack with the lowest, heals the ally with the lowest HP by 5% of their max HP, right? And cannot heal this champion. Solid, right? It's an A1 hit, and we're healing. I'm taking that. A2 ability, AoE attack, heals all allies by 15% of their max HP, decreases duration of all buffs on enemies by 1 turn, increases duration of all buffs on allies by 1 turn. This is that buff extension skill. Really, really strong. And books down to a 3-turn cooldown, by the way. This books down to a 4-turn cooldown with a revive a dead ally with 50% HP and fills your turn meter by 50%, resets the cooldowns on all skills. Resetting the cooldowns on all skills is really nice and kind of like a secret like OP ability right here. Not to mention our passive, not only does it increase the amount of healing all allies receive by 10%, which is nice, but also if an ally is about to get killed by a fatal hit, preempts that hit and instantly places a revive on death buff on them for 1 turn before the damage is taken. Now, a lot of things about this champion. First off, she's got very good multipliers all throughout her kit. I guess A2 is maybe not the strongest hitting ability, but for clan boss, she will deal really good damage. I mean, for me, testing her, playing with her a lot, she's as good a damage dealer as somebody like Iron Brago or Alton. You know, I think the specific numbers might be a little bit in debate. She might be a little bit weaker. I don't know. But what I can tell you is like every time I've used her in my team, she always does damage comparable to those types of champions. Really strong. She's a defensive based champion, which means you can build her to stay alive and do damage, and she's going to do a great job of it. Now, her base HP is a little bit on the lower side, but her base defense is solid and her speed is solid. So building her up shouldn't be too hard. I've always struggled building her HP up as opposed to her defense. So kind of keep that in mind as something you are going to make sure you don't ignore when you're building her. Her passive healing is amazing, right? She heals on the A1, she AoE heal on the A2. Every healing gets better with this passive. I found that in a 2-1 ratio team, just having Godseeker and Aniri in there, especially if I have an ally protection champion, kind of important, you know, depending on the rest of the champions, but generally she can do the job of a healer all by herself because of the 2-1 ratio, because she's getting a lot of attacks, but she's an extremely solid healer. Now, generally I want shields or I want ally protection to go with that in order to maintain that. She's not going to keep your team alive by herself, but she is pretty fantastic as far as that extra healing goes. So I've used her like with a Valkyrie or with like a Krisk or somebody, and I've had no problem, or like a Brogni, and I've had no problem keeping the whole team alive for a majority of the fight just with her healing alone, which is pretty remarkable, I would say. These skills hit hard too, like I said. So, and it books down to a 3-turn cooldown, that buff extension. On top of that, this revive skill allows you to do crazy things like build revive on death comps, which are just kind of out there builds and real hard to do, but it does allow us that capability. So absolutely fantastic champion, very easy to use because 3-turn cooldowns, of course, because she's defensive based. So it's very easy to book her, level her, and put her into any team that you have and extend the buffs. On top of that, she's going to help keep your team alive, which is just fantastic. And then, of course, we have to talk about the big daddy himself, Krisk the Ageless. I mean, just a beast of a champion, right? Now, Krisk is going to be on almost every list of champions that I do, tier list, and he's going to be right up at the top because there's very few champions that do as much as Krisk does. And when it comes to buff extenders, there's nobody better. He's phenomenal at this. Now, so we've talked about a lot of champions, right? If you have Krisk, there's no reason not to be using him in your teams unless you're using him in another team, basically. Like I use mine in Hydra, so I don't use him in Clan Boss, but that's kind of the difference there, right? Like if you bring him into Clan Boss, he can help you get to a 2-key pretty much by himself. Phenomenal champion. A1, decreased speed, doesn't really matter for Clan Boss, right? A2, ally protection, continuous heals, and increases the duration of all ally buffs by 1 turn. This is a bonkers skill. He puts ally protection on everybody and then extends all those buffs. Continuous heals himself, so you don't really need to build lifesteal on him. You don't need to worry about healing with him. Gonna kind of keep himself alive. Just a phenomenal champion. And then of course we got an increased defense on himself, again, to stay alive, and increased speed buff on all allies. So depending on the timing of these skills, you can do things like keep increased speed on your allies for the full fight. You can do things like keep ally protection on your allies for the full fight. And he's pretty phenomenal. If you want to build a 2-1 ratio team with Krisk the Ageless, you only need to bring in one other buff extender or one other speed buff champion, and you can do that. So Krisk actually works great when combined with a Mitha, when combined with a Godseeker Aniri or a Sandlash Survivor. He's going to be phenomenal in those cases, and that is generally how I would actually build him. In fact, building him with a Sandlash Survivor is really good because as the ally protector, chances are his HP is going to drop below 50% before everybody else's. Guess who's going to put ally protection on him? You got it, Sandlash, and then he's extending buffs, Sandlash is extending buffs, and all of a sudden, that ally protection that Sandlash put on him, it's going to be up pretty much for the full fight. can be really, really nice combination there. And so he's got a lot of really great skills in his kit, right? Even his passive ability that places decreased defense, decreased attack on the clan boss, amazing. Like, we all know how great Krisk is. But this is one of his best abilities, is to be able to extend those buffs. This is why he's so amazing in Clan Boss, because he makes it that much easier to gear out your team for everybody. Even if you don't use his increased speed buff here, his A3 skill, you can actually turn that off if you just want to work at like a 1-1 ratio and bring in increased defense from another source. You can combine them with an Alton, and all of a sudden you're going to have all these buffs up for the entirety of the fight, which is what you want. Now, of course, one of the other things with this is now you can run your team slower and still stay at that ratio that you want to do. There's so many things to do with Krisk, but this is why he's one of the best there is. There you go. That's all the buff extension champions in Raid Shadow Legends currently, and pretty much ranked from bottom to the top, I guess, as far as usefulness in Clan Boss. Buff extension makes Clan Boss speed tuning, making your team good, a lot easier, because things like increased defense, ally protection, a lot of times they only have a 2-turn duration, and we want them to last for 3 turns. Bringing in a buff extender can make that happen for you very, very easily. If you have a champion, now most of these buff extenders don't bring a lot of additional stuff to the table outside of Krisk. So this is why champions like Godseeker, Aniri, and Mitha are especially useful. Godseeker because she does crazy damage, and Mitha because she's actually going to bring something else to the table in that block debuff. You know, and then Godseeker on top of that is going to help heal your team. Same thing with the Mitha. So these are why those champions especially are cut above. Sandlash Survivor is just below that. If her passive ability was on the same cooldown as her buff extension, it'd be a lot more useful and a lot more reliable to use her, and I think we'd get a lot more play out of her. As it is, she's still pretty phenomenal to use on your teams. Hope is a great option as well with that massive shield that she gives, and it is a large shield. That is actually a significant thing that she brings to the table. We even have a couple rares like Valkyrie and Hellborn Sprite that can be really useful for you. Valkyrie can cleanse that stun for you if you get the timing of her skills down really nice. That's a very solid thing to bring to the table. In addition to the buff extension, Hellborn Sprite will give you that small weaken debuff. There's a long time where I use Bulwark mostly for that small weaken debuff. Hellborn Sprite is going to be able to do that as well, and by extending the buffs, keep your team alive. So no matter what level of play you are at, bringing in a buff extender can be a really, really good thing to up the potential damage of your team, the survivability of your team, and its viability in Clan Boss. So hopefully this was helpful for you guys. I'm actually kind of getting a kick out of doing these videos, so I'm going to try and keep going with this and do more and more like this. But so hopefully you guys enjoyed it. If you did, please let me know down below, and I'll make sure to keep doing these. If you have a suggestion of a video to do in this vein in the future, let me know that as well, and I will see if I can't do it. So thanks guys for coming by. If you like the video, like, subscribe, you know what to do. Until next we meet, I'm the Deadwood Jedi.